I'm gonna start the video, start recording, right?
Recording in progress.
Thank you.
This is regarding the start of the town plan. Got it, okay. Does anyone want to make a motion to accept the minutes of the meeting on the 19th? And this agenda says approval of May 13th meetings. It should say May 19th minutes.
Make a motion to accept the minutes from May 19th.
Those minutes are correct, and at the top it says minutes of May 19th. We have a second?
Second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
4 to zip. Okay, overview of meeting with John Burnham and Manchester Business Associates. I believe that is referring to the meeting that we had also with Craig Hunter. And I can go over it because I was there. Peter was there too, and Elias was there. That is the meeting we're talking about, right, with John Burnham?
Yeah.
Okay. We basically went in with an agenda to talk about parking in Manchester. Do we have a parking space inventory problem? Do we need to create an inventory by type, location of space, street versus municipal versus private lot? Should we try to identify locations in town where we could direct business people to go for their daytime parking? Same situation with evening parking. Should we have park and walk signs? And I'll stop right there. Craig said, it was a really good meeting with Craig, John, myself, Peter, and Elias. And one of the things Craig said was that when he drives somewhere, and they do it a lot, he focuses on, or he always sees these large blue Ps, signs, which indicate anywhere where there's parking, and he thinks that we should put those in place. Besides, this talks about what's happened historically. This is from 95, which talked about where parking signs are, et cetera. And this will get distributed, by the way. But I just wanted to know, I guess I wanted to know from everybody here, do we have a parking problem in general? Can it be solved with signage? How far do we have to go? Should we have 2 and 3 hour parking signs? And it said, should we address and encourage back connection of private parking lots, which in the depot pretty much exists, but up in the village now that doesn't exist as much, and it should. But I open it up for discussion.
I don't know if we have much power what the village does. The village really is, it's out of our purview. We set an example that's a working example. I think they might follow suit. But we have to come up with something that works as a whole. Now, I've looked into parking, and in big cities, they like to do away with parking spaces. It's because they have public transportation. We don't have that. People have to drive and park places. We have discussed in the past having, the hotels, a shuttle for the hotels. It goes from hotel to hotel, pick people up and bring them downtown or to town center and then back to the hotels. But that would only be a viable option on weekends, which are our busiest time. If we're going to do a time parking, like 2 hours is not an optimal time, in my opinion. I feel like 3 hours is a better time, because if you're going to shop and eat, sometimes that meal takes an hour prepared if the restaurant's busy. And so you don't want to feel rushed to get back to your car before it's towed or taken in. So 3 hours feels like a better, if we're going to have a lots that are city lots, it's just supposed to be a better limit for it.
So in addition to signs that say 3 hour parking in the municipal lots, do we also want to ask the town to put in directional signs like the big P, or sign that says park and walk?
That would, if people understand they can park there and walk places, that makes them feel better about it. It used to be, and I think Bill Drunsick is here saying the same thing, that the whole idea was everybody shared parking spaces all over town. And everybody parked and walked, and everybody else has walked. This town is so small, you can park it, over at Ben and Jerry's and walk down to, to the Crystal Palace, so it's not, unmanageable.
That was done by a firm for the town in 1995, and I'm sorry we couldn't get a distribution for everybody here, but we will. And it talks about park and walk signs, which I think is a great idea.
Great idea. I mean, we should do it. We should also discuss with certain businesses like the car dealership to use their back lot on weekends when, you know, it's busiest as a weekend lot, because they're not that busy on the weekends.
That initially has been, happened.
I don't think there's really much headway made with men's, so that's not really an option. And
No, but getting MEMS employees to park in their lots.
that's
is-
helped with that lot during the week. Yeah,
They've got,
that lot is now empty half to them.
you know, they've got the lot next to the telephone company, and then they got the lot back where the buses are.
Right.
Yes, Karen.
Can I suggest bringing in all of the big property owners that own the parking lots? Because they're all frustrated. Like I've said multiple times, Northshire looks for Laneway, Walgreens, Stanton, Merchant Spain. You know, the Hampton Inn's upset about the Greek restaurant. I mean, everyone's concerned with that list of people that I gave you. And I think if we're gonna do anything with parking, we pay the taxes, we pay the insurance, we pay the brunt of what's going on in our parking lots. You know, and it was set up. I mean, I've said it multiple times, and the big issue on our restaurants coming into the downtown that will be affected, whether it's offices, if it's commercial, retail space. That doesn't add as much of a burden, but if you look at parking statistics and stuff, like when people are not only walking down for retail, but then they're dining in a restaurant. You know, the volume for parking spaces increases that much more for a restaurant than it does for retail. It's a big burden on the community.
This is not an opinion of this group, but my personal opinion is the evening issue is not really the issue to me. It's in the evening, you've got the community bank parking lot. I think you've got Walgreens parking lot in the evening. You've got the municipal parking behind Walgreens. I bet you even got stands. I'm not sure that he cares about what happens in the evening, because that's not when he has his crunch. But during the day, yes, the issue is there, and I've talked to two private property owners who have a lot of parking about how do we get a business in town, like a retail business or a professional business in town, to utilize their space, which they have available, during the day instead of on-street parking. That's important. But if you have people on that list that you gave me that you think ought to come in here and talk to us, I encourage it.
Okay.
Okay?
Hey, Peter, do we have a copy in our land use and development ordinances? Do we have a copy of the parking tables?
What you're asking for is the table that assigns,
Yeah, the signs times, it assigns times and it signs.
the ordinance, yeah.
Yeah, it's all in here somewhere. I just don't know what page it would be on.
I'm gonna make a copy.
You have your ordinance?
I'm looking for it.
Oh my God.
Because there was rules set in place a while back that we always used as our go-tos, and the rules. Basically, it looked at different times of the day when certain restaurants would be busy and some would be not busy. And when we tried to develop, yeah, Peter has it right here, page 113. So,
Breakfast restaurant.
right. So we tried, the original thing when things were approved, they're supposed to be approved by that chart. So if a restaurant comes in, let's say it's a pub and it works at night, like Hague's, for instance. Because it's definitely just a night place. No one's there at like noon. So someday, yeah. But most of the time it's a night place. So their parking would be mostly at night, which would allow the shoe store to have their parking during the day. So it creates a balance. If you build without looking at the chart, it becomes unbalanced.
Correct.
And so that's up to the DRB to follow the chart that the planning commission has put in place. If the DRB doesn't follow that chart and they approve things that are out of balance, it creates a parking deficit.
Right.
And so now I believe that's happened, and now we're dealing with the aftermath of the deficit. And we're trying to figure out a way to fix the problem that was created by not following the rules.
Right, thank you,
Okay, so
I appreciate it.
Speak up.
Yeah. I'd really like to move on from the issue of parking. I mean, this has been weeks, months. I'm not a fan of adding a significant amount of more signage. If we can find a way to do it in a minimal, we can make it minimal. I think that would make sense, and I think most people would agree with that. I just think back to some of the businesses that I go to, and they have signs all like printed paper signs. And I would hate for Manchester to start looking like that. But I do agree that if we don't have signage pointing people towards shared parking lots, public parking lots, then that's a problem. But I do want to come back to what I really think is, I don't think that parking is an issue in this town. I have never gone to a single business and not been able to find a parking spot. And in fact, on the busiest days of the year, the busiest times of the day, you will find empty parking lots left and right. Now, we may have some people coming here who are very vocal and opposed to similar businesses to theirs being open. I can only imagine it's because of competition. But if we have staff spending hours and hours and hours literally counting parking spaces.
I was not aware that we have, who is doing that?
We have our staff counting parking spaces.
Do we have staff parking?
We have asked them, we have said, can we get an idea of how many parking spaces there are in this town?
We haven't gone to that extent. This, by the way, this is did you get this? I think I sent it over to you, right? This is Craig Hunter's inventory of their parking capacities. And to a degree, I agree with what you said about there isn't as big a parking problem as people kind of think, some people think about. There's an awful lot of spaces on this sheet. And I think the one issue I see is that we got to stop having local business people park on Main Street all day long. That's
Yeah, I think ideally, yes, that makes sense, but I don't think that you can zone that into existence.
okay. Just to bring it up to make sure we all agree or disagree on this volatile issue, should we be thinking about parking meters on Main Street?
No.
But a time limit, like 3 hours would help with that area. Because I know a few business owners, I'm not gonna name any names, who do park in those spaces all day long.
Yep.
And so that does create an issue, and most of them do have spaces behind the buildings that they can park in. It's just more convenient for them to walk right through the front door.
Okay, well,
So-
what about if we go to the town manager and say that we'd like to talk about signage for the transient coming in, that big blue, or I think it's blue P that Craig was talking about is kind of universal.
Mhm.
Should we have some of those 3 or 4 around town? And the other thing is, should we have the 3-hour parking on Main Street, which we don't have, there are no restrictions on it. Can we do those two things, and is the select board going to be agreeable to that?
I mean, I can't speak for the select board, but I think you're right about limiting the all-way parking. I think that's a big part of where some of the congestion comes in and in a very, in places that are so obvious. We know all the owners of all parking, you see the cars there all the time. And I agree. I don't think if there's a municipal lot, we should have signs. I think that's kind of a no-brainer and something recognizable, makes sense. But I
You do note that there was a 2-hour limit put up on the new Walgreens lot, municipal lot.
yeah, I think that makes so much sense. And then I love the idea of what you were talking about evening parking where in businesses where they're not open during the evening, but that, I think there's practical solutions, and I do think that with a little bit of looking at what other towns do, there's ways to solve this without, encumbering and making it harder for business owners to, for their customers to park. I think that there's somewhat easy solution that can be found.
Parking table, if you don't have a copy.
I don't have this, no. Other issues on the parking? So we're gonna ask the town manager and also the select board about the signage.
Didn't we do a mock-up of Bowl? I thought we saw 2 mock-ups of that.
On the signs?
Yeah.
Yes, we have signs.
That's not the P, the big blue P, no,
That's correct.
something different.
That's something different.
Yeah, I think there's something different, for me at least, might be a little more preferable for Manchester.
The map that we have here from 1995
Yeah.
was locations of the parking. It also has, directional kiosks, things of that nature to help the foot traffic.
Okay, so in order to proceed ahead and try to take some action on this, we're gonna go to the town manager and ask about the signage issue, the park and walk issue, maybe the 3-hour issue versus the 2-hour issue. And
I think 3 hours to Main Street.
yes. Agreed with that?
Mhm.
Okay. And I made a mistake by starting out of the wrong thing here. We should have started out with our annual appointment of officers. So we need to have motions to,
Is she here online or Carolyn here online or no? She's not here tonight?
I gave her a call on her cell.
Okay, first she was here, but I mean, if you guys want to go ahead with it, we'll go ahead with it.
we're supposed to at this meeting.
Okay, then yeah, we'll do it.
Does anyone want to make a motion?
I motion that we elect our officers and go over our rules of procedure for the planning commission.
Ready? Do you have a slate of officers?
I would, let's see here. The tough one, there's a lot of people to go through. I would like to nominate Wilbur Rice for chair of the planning commission.
Ready? We have a second.
Okay. Aye.
We have a vote and there's a vote.
4 is it? Oh, 3 is it?
Did
Can you?
Thomas vote?
Yes, it is.
Okay, 4-0. Now we need a vice chair.
I nominate this gentleman right here for vice chair. Because I believe
I'd like
that,
to second that.
I believe that he has more experience in this than I do. Just because I've been on the board longer, doesn't mean that I have the most experience within this realm of planning, so I'd like to nominate him for vice chair, and
And I seconded it, and I'd like to have a vote on that. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 4-0. We've moved on. Is there anything else on the rules that you want to talk about?
do we have to do a secretary?
Well, we tried that last meeting and people hid underneath the desk.
You know, I mean, she's not here right now, so she can't hide.
So not sure we're going to be successful at that.
Okay.
My position is I am very appreciative of the process that is in place at the moment.
So we've done election of officers and so we've done that. There's adoption. We have to adopt the rules. So I motion that we adopt the rules as they stand.
Same rules.
Yep.
Okay, I second that. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Let's see here. Robert's rules, open meetings, executive session, deliberate session. That's what I want to change, so everything looks good.
I'd like to have the minutes show that we should all be very appreciative of the service of our vice chair to date, Mr. Ward.
Oh, well, I didn't do much. I'm late to every meeting.
Okay, I'd like to move on from the parking, but there is a pay for parking issue in the town core. And we sent our thoughts to the select board on that. Do you want to talk about it, or is the select board still discussing the pay for parking in the town core issue?
But I think I heard from a couple of you that that's something that you're in favor of, right? Is that accurate?
No, my position was that Peter had revised the wording and basically given the fee determination to the select board. That's what we believed was the right thing to do, so it has flexibility. And select board, I believe, said they didn't like that. Is that right?
So, I think we were going off, so I think the confusion was there's a bunch of different numbers that were referenced, is that right?
Do you have a copy of what we had proposed with you?
No.
Just a minute to read that.
It's the last red sentence, I believe.
15,000, I think
And
that's.
I think that we were comfortable because that was a number that was from like
2011,
and it
2012.
wasn't accurately reflecting what would cost to build municipal parking. And so I think by kind of, the conversation basically involved like this, that if somebody's developing a property and it goes through, development review approval, and then it comes to us, and there's an assumption that they're using, and then suddenly the number's drastically different from the one that they were using, then the project might not actually work with that, with those fees. And that kind of felt like what happened with the replace.
So basically what you're saying is that the determination of the dollar amount applied to each parking space should be done before DRB finishes making a submission to you.
I do think that makes sense, because even like, I mean, from the people at, the Greek place, the number, I don't even know where they came up with that number, the $4,000, was that?
2,000, then it was wrong number.
John had taken the number that was approved for Bill's project for the downtown.
Yeah.
And he adjusted for inflation from that date forward.
So I think your point that number has to be determined before the project is fully approved is correct, because if the guy says, oh, I didn't know that it was gonna be 20,000 per parking space, that makes it not work for me. Then he has to start over again.
So that, all the engineering that went into it, it came to us, it really put us in a very tricky.
Do we know how many seats there are in the Greek? How many seats are there?
It's,
Do we know how many sit down?
When you start the meetings, you talked about it.
The rule for a restaurant is one parking space for every 2.5 seats. If there's 100 seats.
16 bike spots.
So was there a discussion about fee schedules?
Yeah, but I guess.
Because sorry, it sounded like that was kind of where the discussion was going, at least a little bit. So incorporating the payment in lieu of parking into the town's fee schedule so that it could answer that question from DRB ahead of time. And then you guys could change it more frequently than how quickly we appear to move.
so if we can go back to the DRB and say, we think that the price per parking space has to be determined by the DRB, not by the select board. So that the applicant knows in the process how much it's going to cost him, not after he's done everything else and then he gets handed a number by the select board.
Yeah, I think that's a lot more fair.
Okay, so we're going to send that back to the select board with, this is what we think should be the case, and copy the DRB.
Isn't the DRB still too far down the road for a developer? If they get to a design review board, they've already spent money on architects and engineers, they've got a business thesis, they've got a business plan, they've got a bank.
Yes or no, they could do a preliminary. But
I would suggest that, because I think the DRB at the end, it comes in at the end primarily. If it's a
So
preliminary, that's great.
then it's going to go back to Peter to give them a ballpark of what a parking space is going to cost when they're doing their projections and business plan.
I mean, it'd be a very large number if you were talking about purchasing additional land.
It's 15,000. We've done this already.
Yeah.
And then we struck it out.
Yeah.
And I think, I think the select board could pick that number. They could change it every year,
Yeah.
like we do the tax rate.
Thomas was talking about, our fee schedule tends to get stale, and so I think just as a group, I think we're trying to figure out ways to review that on an annual basis.
Right.
But I also, I would hate to put us in a position where
I understand.
it's a larger development, and all of a sudden they're looking, like doing a 20 spot deficit. And I don't even know what that would look like, if we had to purchase land, like you said, and build a lot, like, I don't have $15,000 problems.
And
But doesn't that mean that there has to be flexibility at some point? I don't know whether it's with Peter or DRB, you're right about it, shouldn't go to the select board because that's too late in the process. But the person who's building something here might end up paying a different price than the person who's building something over here.
Yeah,
it's true.
I mean, or if it's 2 spots.
So where do we tell the applicant what the rules and the game
I
is?
think it's important to warn them that it could be as much as X, 15,000,
Or as little as.
or as little as.
Which is how I think we have phrased
Okay, is
it
that
originally.
your responsibility, your office's responsibility?
Honestly, I don't know. I'm happy to help navigate that. If
I think Scott could.
Scott would be ultimately the one that would make that recommendation, I would imagine.
Okay, so why don't we leave it that you're gonna go to Scott with this issue, that the price of these pay for parking spaces has to be determined early in the process for the applicant, and then has to finally be approved by DRB and eventually by select board.
Maybe you could set it as the 15,000 with an appeal to the select board to reduce it for a hardship.
It's 15 might not be right. In one part in town, it might be 25. Who knows? I mean, how much is it gonna cost?
Do we know where we came up with the 15,000?
It goes back as far as 2011, I
It seems,
think.
well, and I asked, because it seems weird, like we were
Wow.
at 15,000 at one point, and then in the late,
The-
almost 20, what was 2018? I don't even know. How did we get to 2,000?
Yeah.
15,000 to 2,000?
2000 is Bill's number.
And then how was it not changed zoning?
I think it was negotiated.
Was
I
it
mean,
changed?
And that's what happens is I'm sure you get negotiated, how badly you don't want this project, how beneficial it is to
But
the.
then again, that particular developer paid for the municipal lot, half of it's lot too, so let's not. That was, so it's.
But was it changed in zoning? Was it voted on, or was it just?
I have no idea.
Numbers.
I don't,
Just a second. Karen?
I think it should be in your zoning ordinance, and I think it should be minimally, it's 15,000. Maximally, it could be like 35,000 to be negotiated. So at least like if I'm a developer coming into Manchester, I can look at the zoning rules and I can see that there's.
At least, it's gonna be at least 15 grand.
Yeah. And
Minimum.
I decide if I want to pursue my project or not, right? But it should be
Absolutely.
like
Yes.
And then the other thing we talked about was, there's a lot of kind of subjective language in that, in the part, I think you and Ivan had a conversation and tried to talk about, or did you and Ivan have a
yeah,
conversation?
Ivan and I had a conversation on the phone, and I think what he was trying to say was that this whole thing was set up for older buildings
Right,
who did not necessarily have additional land, and there was no potential for them to get any more land.
it's not to buy a small lot and cram as much real estate.
And knock down an older building or a historic building
Right.
or parking. I think that's what they wanted to avoid, is my understanding.
Well,
So-
but yet on the flip side of that, if we want to promote the development of town and properties, the more expensive we make it, and the more onerous we make it by having parking requirements at all.
Yeah, that's a
Is an
conversation.
issue, and I think
I
that's
think
I think that's a
we-
larger conversation we
we
should be
should make
having.
sure
rather
that
than
We don't get this
charging
issue,
people $15,000
confused with the-
a month.
yes, we shouldn't get this issue confused with the 1,500 square foot issue. That's a different issue.
Different.
And
Oh, no, I'm not talking about 1,500, I'm talking about.
that issue is
Parking
going
minimums
to be
altogether.
something that Merrill takes up, I believe.
Who?
Merrill Bennett, the lawyer.
So I guess in this section, if there's a way to make it a little less wordy and a little more ruly instead of, it seemed to us it was a bit, like, easy way out. Like, we don't, I mean, having those kind of phrases.
It's
in
more
ordinance,
conversational.
yeah, I just feel like that needs to be tightened up. Oh, it seemed a little subjective to us, so, and I get what you were trying to do, because I understand what Ivan was saying with this, but it needs to, I think, be clear and a little more succinct, the kind of conversation.
That applies to a lot of things in the ordinances.
I'm sure.
So have you got direction on that, Peter?
I think I can kind of wordsmith a little bit, but if anybody else wants to jump in and assist them.
I feel like the idea of a range, I think that could be useful because, and I don't know that it needs to be negotiated by the board, but it could be, you know, I would like things to reflect on the true cost of actually getting the spots, building the spots, or building a lot.
Taxes, plowing,
Yeah.
paving.
And when you're just kind of pulling a number out of the air, it has nothing to do with the reality of actually building a lot. So, I think, you know, if there's a range, it gives people an idea of what it would mean to have deficit parking. And for people that have existing parking or existing structures with adequate parking, it's not going to influence, it's not
It's
going
gonna
to
change.
change anything.
So can we involve the town manager to ask him whether it's appropriate to have in the ordinance a minimum cost? And that cost may be above that depending on certain circumstances.
Or it could be lowered as well, right?
You know,
I think we have like a floor, and I feel like we just, it really messed us up with this particular thing, so,
So 15 is the floor, you think?
yeah, and if, you know, the price of paving goes down by 70%, we can revisit it.
I think the 15 number is probably in the end going to be determined by the town manager and the select board.
Got it.
There has to be a base.
Okay. Well, I'll rewrite that. And if anybody has any further thoughts, I'm happy to entertain that, but
Can we, as Thomas would like, can we get past the parking issue?
I second that.
I definitely think we've
I
made
want to, then I'll
it a
talk
bigger
about,
issue than it truly was.
excuse me,
I just think we've made it into a bigger issue than it truly is.
I think there's some truth to that. Did you see this? That's the inventory of Hubman property. I'm going to talk about a meeting, anything else on parking? I'm going to talk about a meeting quickly that was Cornerstone Housing Partners. Three organizations have united, the Neighborhood Works of Western Vermont, the Shires Housing and the Housing Trust have all combined. And there was a meeting at Fern Burton that Seth Bongartz organized to explain things. And I went, also from the town was Gordon Black went. And it basically talked about the state's involvement in trying to make housing more affordable. And I'm going to be very brief and say that my take out of this was that there are programs existing that help people, but you can't find them. And there are many different entities, there are many different people. It's almost as if you need a guide to take you through what's available for decreased down payment, what's available for help in your financing costs and other things that can make it more affordable for young people. And then it talked about all the type of building that they want to do and such, but it was a little disappointing from my standpoint, because it didn't talk about if Manchester has a severe housing crisis. It may not be severe, but it's significant. I think we should be talking about everything around us. How can we work with Sunderland? How can we work with Arlington? How can we work with Granville, Danby, on and on and on? And I'm not sure we're doing that well enough. And this thing, I said to Seth afterwards, I said, this to me is a lot like the education crisis that we have. Is a lot of it's based on centralization. And if you start decentralizing it and making it easier for somebody to have progress in this and to get help, that's gonna be a huge positive, but I was glad that Seth did it, and it was interesting to meet the people around, the head of Bromley, the head of the, a bunch of people from Montpelier, the Dorset town manager, obviously Gordon, et cetera, et cetera. It was education. So I don't know if you want to talk further about it or learn from somebody else. That took place. So next on the agenda to me is the beginning steps for updating the town plan. And we just got a distribution from our
X,
ex
yeah.
vice chair. Do you want to take over now?
So originally I'd given you guys a printout that had a list of categories that were based upon our old town plan. Now, and that was just to help move along the old, rewriting the old town plan in time for the new update, which we just adopted the old one. So it doesn't matter. So now, since we just adopted the old one, we could really start on, and we have time to start on updating a actual new town plan, like a new. And I went online and I did a lot of research on what other towns are doing and what the main categories and what they have going on are. And I took away from, based upon what we have and what we need and what they have that works, made this list. So as in each of these little sections here at the dot, those are different categories of, for the town plan that are basics for most towns. Demographics, information on the population size, age, gender, racial characteristics, household size, birth and death rates, and population distribution. And we can also, with each of these categories I've listed on the second page, we can put goals and objectives for each of these categories and implementation, I'm not going to say it, strategies to help us, implement the, to help us, so even demographics, we can look at projected demographics, what we see for the future of Manchester based upon the current rate of growth. We can project what it's going to be in 10 or 20 years. And then we can plan accordingly to that. Now, that being said, we get on to housing, which housing here, information on housing stock, commission prices, affordability, vacancy rates, and future housing needs. Now, future housing needs is being addressed in great detail by the Housing Task Force. We are really making strides in that. We have some proposals coming up pretty soon, and we're going to see how kind of numbers we have within those proposals, and that's going to tell us, it gives us an idea if that development comes in, how much growth we're going to have all at once. Now, a big growth all at once has to be planned for. So we have to, as we work on the town plan, we have to look at each of these categories and think about that growth for the future and work towards that. We can't have, for instance, every car in town going down to the circle and trying to get through all at once, because it would be once again and turn back into dysfunction junction where cars back up for months. So we have to think about future roads, connecting roads, things like that, in order to keep everyone off of one road.
Would it be possible to see any of the ideas or concepts that the Housing Commission has come up with for the future?
There's going to be a meeting coming up it's pretty soon. Thomas, you know when it is, that meeting?
Say that again?
It's the next meeting for the Housing Commission. We're having a meeting where they're going to get proposals.
Oh, I don't know the date.
Oh, yeah, it's me at the library.
There's two, right?
Yeah, it's me, two of them. They're going to be at the library.
Yeah.
And the developers are going to give us.
Probably look it up.
their
I don't
proposals.
mean the proposals.
But the numbers are within the development proposals. So until we accept a proposal, we don't know the actual number of what we're going to be accepting.
Number of what? Houses?
Houses being built.
Okay,
So the
that's
house.
not what I'm asking though, we are.
Yeah,
What I'm asking is, has the Housing Commission prepared a report for the future housing requirements of Manchester in the next 5 to 10 years?
It was pretty high. I don't remember the exact number, but it was way higher than what we're getting proposed.
So hang on, so just back just 1 second. So the state of Vermont has done the analysis on the housing requirements for the state. That's been, cookie butter spread out by county. And didn't Bennington County give us?
Those are soft goals, right?
Yeah, that's soft goals, but how does that relate to the numbers that you guys have?
Well, some of the numbers are like 700 units, some of them are 300 units, you know, but
No, I don't mean for the project, I mean for the town.
For the
The
town.
housing commission is supposed to be looking for the town, not just to one proposal.
yeah, we were going by the state guidelines, what the state needs and by what the county was proposed by the state. So that's what we're looking at for the goals. But it's still a huge number in comparison to what we're getting built. I believe it was, like, do you remember?
It's 200.
I just wonder, like, the housing task force meetings are July 10th and the 17th
Yeah. That sounds right.
at NCL, 6 P.M.
Okay, yeah.
So the next.
So we don't really know what our future housing needs are. We're just, we're gonna place a bet that says one of these proposals is gonna answer the problem.
One of these proposals is gonna be a definite number of what's gonna be built.
But we don't know if that's gonna satisfy a problem.
But if we get 700 units built, that's at least 700 more cars on the road daily in town. And 700 more people going to Shaw's and lining up for food, you know, and so we have to think about our future needs when we do the town plan based on what is going to happen with the influx of new people moving here.
Can I make a statement in regards? Go ahead.
If they move.
Yeah. And I say units, some of those units are 3 bedrooms, so it's a big number.
You are the planning commission's representative to the housing task force. And I would think it would be reasonable to ask the housing task force to give a status report to the planning commission and at the same time to the DRB and at the same time to the select board saying, here's what our goals are, here's what we've accomplished to date, here's what we want to do next, here's where we are. We know that you won't be done at all. You got, you know, whether you're 20% into it or whatever, but I think it would be helpful if you educated those 3 commissions, whatever, on where you stand and what you're working on and.
Oh, I agree. The reason I don't have any actual numbers in front of me is because we aren't really given any handouts.
How about going to the July 10th, to the group? We need to tell the 3 committees, and maybe there's another committee too, like the design committee, where we stand, what we're working on, what progress we've made, what we think, observations, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, it is members of each committee on the housing task force. So they, you know, I'm the planning
I
commission.
know there's a member from each committee on that
Yeah.
housing task force, but my point is, we need to know what's going on.
Right. We don't have any hard numbers at the moment because we haven't accepted a proposal.
Not so much hard numbers, but what are you doing?
Well, right, we have an open meeting coming up to meet with developers to look at proposals. And then we will discuss afterwards which proposal is best suited for Manchester.
No, I know about that, but you've been working at this for about a year, and
I know.
what has transpired? Can you give us an education? And I'm not talking about now.
No.
I'm talking about invite us.
Someone, yeah.
Just even this, maybe you just go back to the commission for us as our representative and take the notes that you already created here and just say that, you know, we're looking for information on the housing stock, the condition of that stock, prices, affordability, vacancy rates, future housing needs. We'd like to know, you know, what the housing commission's goals and objectives are and what their implementation
We
strategies
do
are.
have within the housing task force, we do have the vacancy rates, we do have all of that.
Right, so come back and, you know,
That's gonna help us with that section.
Give us an education.
yeah, I mean, that's what I'm hoping for.
Yes.
We asked Carl for the similar for the energy, and boy, was that a mistake.
Oh,
It was-
When we get to housing, we get
Good.
to the section of housing, I was hoping to use someone and all the information from the housing task force for that
Right,
section, because that's gonna be, they've done all the research. It's all there.
right.
It's just spread up between like, you know, like Joanne and everybody else has it, Cindy and Jonathan, they all have the information. And it's divided amongst them. So,
I think we just need to get that in one place.
Yeah.
So I think that's the kind of baseline information that's gonna help us to rally the town around this plan.
You need to be educated.
I don't want to jump to a 700 unit solution. Wow. I mean, it might be right, but who knows?
yeah,
At least, you know, not to use a pun, but you know, we need some runway to kind of lead people to.
Oh, I agree, I agree.
So
Yes, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Can we include for the public a successful program that's funded? The metrics, either the housing task force or others are using for these forecasts, I think you know the answer for the state. But the local criteria, what does that consist of? Because there's 5-year, 15-year, been around here for 40 years. No, you've seen the flow.
Let me answer that. So back to the issue of, I'd love to see the housing task force do a presentation. Maybe it is the library because you might accommodate more people there, where they tell the community and including the planning commission, the zoning board, the DRB and the select board there, what they've done and what their goals are still to achieve. And that should be part of it, and the public should be welcomed there. So you should know what we know.
Which is going to be, if there's holes to be punched in the data, I think they're a state would ask.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. I think there are holes to be punched in all the data because it relies on a whole bunch of nonsense. And I think that it's,
That is apparent in this.
you know, it's like, you just don't know. And to some extent, that's why a 700 unit, you know.
That was the high end, that was the high end.
Solve the problem, but I do think having some data, and even if you go to the state database and look up number of residents, you know, number of people visiting, you know, number of births, and you look it up for different segments of Manchester or the county, they don't add up. So even the state has a difficult job in, you know, trying to keep it right.
I believe the state projected that they want 2,000 new residences in the county. That's
Right.
not even close to reality.
So somewhere in there, there's visual thinking, there's other guesses, but when we add anything skewed to the years from 2008 to 2020, or we just looking from 2020 to 2025 and throwing a big number at it?
If I remember rightly, it was a calculation based on the 5-year trailing population growth of a particular town. Yes, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. We got COVID in there. We've got, you know, lots of other things that are skewing it. So it's a best guess. And I'm okay if it's a best guess. But when people start saying we need, you know, 250 and a half houses and 35 new roads, I'm like, yeah, it's going to be a little hard. It's not going to work out well.
That if we could apply this as a percentage on current existing homes within current full-time residents. And I think the short answer to our problem is when we are doing housing crisis manages, we're going to affordable or workforce housing crisis.
I don't know. I mean, that's why I want to hear from the housing commission, because if you look at a 2x2 matrix that has people who work here, people who don't, people who live here, people who don't, and you start thinking about those 4 quadrants, there's a lot of housing here that's okay. The gap that's missing is young families or a young single person moving to take a new job that doesn't want a 3-bedroom house. They want a 1 or 2-bedroom house that they can grow into.
But even a 3-bedroom house, finding one to rent is nearly impossible.
Right, so that's the manager that's coming to work for the new restaurant that's being built, or the car dealer.
Well, I can't do the math, but in order to afford the average apartment, like 1-bedroom apartment in Manchester, you're using that like 30-something%
You know,
range for your income, we're talking $70,000 a year.
Yeah.
So
it's a crisis. It's a crisis.
And that issue also,
I'll try to bring it back. The target, I don't recall what the target is for Bennington County. And I think if someone is looking for how the state came up with the information, they should look at the Vermont Housing Assessment Study. I forget exactly what it's called. That's where it came from. The target So the BCRC gets the number from the state and then they try to kind of average it out based on the current size of towns, what its growth looks like. So I don't think that they're just kind of like lobbing numbers of different towns.
No, but it's a peanut butter spread.
Yeah, I mean, nothing's
It's an
perfect.
allocation.
But my understanding is the target goal is 200 units.
Right, that's right, that's what I.
Here, it's, I thought it was
Yeah.
300.
Two, I
It's 200.
think it's two,
Is it planned?
it's a different mix.
Well, we're not looking for a single solution for that either, but if
No,
you're
no.
developing that, the whole thing, you're getting a year to agreement. So it's, you're looking for different kinds of housing stock to come on.
Right.
I also think that if we have more apartments and condos, you'll see older people that live in houses that don't want to deal with the maintenance start to shift to these apartments, and then those houses.
And Heidi, my point in this discussion, the reason why I kind of took it this way is because I think this is what the Housing Commission should be answering. Not that we're going on the 10th and the 17th to the library to discuss proposals. I'm still waiting, I've asked a number of times for it, still waiting for what's the baseline problem and what are some of the solutions that we're thinking of?
Well, so the baseline problem, the way I explained to me, is that most people who work here in town don't live here in town. They have to drive.
Right, but how many of those people own a house?
They don't own a house. Some of them live in Granville, Cambridge, different places around where they drive to Manchester. Londonderry, even Londonderry has.
So that, how many of them are renting?
Well,
Where it's
How
more
many of them-
affordable, i.e. 20 miles to the west or north of us, or even to the southwest of us, a lot of them are owning there.
Right, so hang on a second, so if you own 25 minutes away and you've got some equity built in your
25
property,
minutes.
and you've got, maybe if you bought it before COVID, you've got a 3.5% mortgage rate, why would you sell it and move?
I would say
You
they're
just
not
do the
going
commute.
to.
Well,
Right.
yeah, but not everyone who's looking for a place to live is looking or can afford to buy something.
Agreed.
That's different.
Agreed. I'm just trying to
Right.
get this big number and start
Right.
carving out
I
people
don't
who.
think it's the number that's important. I think it's the fact that we just make it difficult. It just is. The state has made it difficult to build things through no fault of our own, in a sense. We have made it difficult to build things. We have made it illegal to build, and I will continue to say this, we have made it illegal to build exactly like the core part of our town. What makes Manchester, Manchester? You cannot build that today.
Right.
It is outlawed.
Right.
The only way to solve
What
this
about
is
the-
to just
what
build
about
more, to
the,
make it easier to build.
Austin Miles, what about Joe's properties?
Can
I
you?
think there was that's a
Can you listen
great
to,
property.
I want to hear that last sentence again.
And I was just repeating myself. The only way to solve this problem is to build more and to make it easier to build more.
And cheaper to build.
And
Cheaper to build. And
one of the,
I don't want to continue coming back to parking, like continuing to mandate certain amount of parking spots. Like we are mandating that homes have parking spots.
and one of the reasons we're building on this
That's
lot
the cost.
on Richfield Road is that it's town-owned land. And the reason, what we're looking at for these developments is we're looking at the town maintaining like a covenant with the land and owning the land and to keep it from becoming short-term rentals. Becoming, it's just housing stock. It's not someone buys it as an investment and then flips it as a short-term rental. We don't need more of that. So we're trying to make it so it is affordable. 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom apartments, townhouses, work live spaces. It's all in that development. So it's supposed to be solve a lot of the problems we're having at one time.
Can you speak up, by the way? And also, what is your name?
My name is David Nunn. And,
Paper.
any case, just a couple points I got lost in the conversation. You said something that's really know with me, but then I have to focus on what Thomas said. Is the purpose to create affordable housing and possibly workforce housing? Or is it to drive traffic back into Manchester? Can you explain that? So. And then we know this is the most obvious solution, not everything that works in a time. But it seems like what we're saying is we want to take commuters out of the outside communities and park them in Manchester to work here.
That's the first I've heard of that concept.
We just said that we want to build all these houses in a concentrated area. I don't know that, I don't understand the part about you can't recreate Manchester as it says, but it sounds like we're trying to rearrange the fabric of what is Manchester life, which is fine if it's needed for growth, I think. But I don't think there's anything wrong with what you said earlier about working, that's what it was, for the Sunderland and other communities that may be able to have more affordable housing outlets. Instead of taking
So we're
700 units and putting them somewhere in town that's gonna go through the circle, it's gonna sidewalks.
we're not,
The simplest part of what you have to solve, you really have to solve, is the infrastructure piece involved in making this, Troy, New York.
so I'm hearing what you're saying, but now, and I will try to explain it because this is way off topic where we're going with Catherine. But I will say that we are not approaching Sunderland to develop Sunderland because we're trying to, whatever we build here in town, it's gonna be connected to town sewer.
Correct.
When we build outside of town, there's a whole list of things that go into septic systems for a 300 unit development. It's huge. It causes a lot of environmental catastrophe. So we'd like to connect to the sewer. So the city lot is only, I think it's like 200 meters from the sewer line, so we can connect to it. So that's one of the reasons we're looking at that lot to develop. Now, as far as moving people here, we also don't want sprawl outside in our smaller surrounding towns. We don't want to sprawl everybody out and force more traffic on the roads driving in. We'd like to make it where everybody is in town, not just to boost Manchester's economic, growth, but also to make it so there's less cars, more walkable, closer to schools. Everything, if you keep it in town, it's a better development for the future than sprawling it out.
This is. I love the idea of that happening. It is a heavy lift. Some of this will be solved organically from the business owners who will either change their rate of pay or house their workers. We see that happening around and about. But this is a gigantic lift to be not taken lightly, and I have two sides of interest on this. So I think I can look at it somewhat balanced, but.
I mean, we do have hotels and motels in town that do house their workers within hotels and motels. And otherwise they would have no place for those workers to live. And that constitutes a housing crisis. We do have places like Stratton buying up all the motels around to house their workers because there is a housing crisis. There is a shortage of housing for those workers to rent and live in on their own. So, to me, I would not want to live in a motel for 6 months because it's not a comfortable place, one bedroom to be stuck in my everyday coming back to. Yes, it might be on my own, but it's not, there's just no movement there. And so homes make people happy, they make people prosper. Motels are not, and hotels living in those, it's not the thing to do. So yeah, yes, the business owners may try to solve this themselves, but why should they have to? As town leaders, it's our job to come up with a plan for the town. And that's what we're working on now.
Could you go back to the Housing Task Force and ask them, the Planning Commission would like to get some level of education from them and one-on-one meetings to help us understand what you're doing, what your goals are.
Yeah, it's supposed to be my job, buddy. How do I?
And I will ask you even your look back. That's just because a 5-year look back is going to lead.
It's very skewed because of COVID and because of all the Airbnbs and stuff that popped up. There's so much that happened in that 5 years. So we doubled our number of short-term rentals in that time, and our population also boomed, and it's just so much happens. So it's a hard metric. Yeah,
Still happening.
so it's still happening.
Okay, can we move on? I'd like to also mention that
No, we want to keep going.
I am going to ask Scott and in turn probably Merrill Bent that I'd like to see some effort made to put in place an STR registration.
Yes.
It's related to this issue. I said a long time ago, I didn't see the relationship. I see it more now.
Yeah.
And I think it's something that we're pretty much the only person, the only town around anywhere that
Doesn't have it.
Right.
Right,
Yeah.
so,
If that's what you're thinking, why do we have to ask the town manager or the town attorney? Can't-
because we've been told to date that we shouldn't do this.
But we should.
Towns are doing
No,
it. So
but
if we want to,
we
if
should.
we want to.
We
This-
have.
the planning
no, no, no,
commission should
and
stay out of it.
The town has, we've been directed that we shouldn't waste our time doing it. It's gonna be part of the Home Act.
But
I don't personally agree with that. I think it's necessary from a safety standpoint at least, et cetera, but I think it's
From a
something that
taxes
should
point of
be,
view.
should be discussed. Hopefully, we can get permission to do it. I've got a lot of information on it, and I think it's worth doing, so.
And I would say the Housing Task Force is working on that as well. And there's some very smart people on that task force who are working on rules for short-term rentals.
Yep.
And it'll come to us and then it'll go through us and we will discuss it and add to it or take away from it. And then we will pass it on to the select board for approval. Because it's,
Alrighty, I'd like to move on. I'm gonna do something quick. The request for proposal on the grant. Where do we stand on that? Is that something Gordon does or Gordon? or-
We have the money set aside. We have to decide which direction we're going as a board, what we want to work on. We're going to work on the town plan, but what help do we need? I'd like to get at least a consensus from the
We,
board.
do we take this excellent information that our ex-vice chair, I'm just gonna call you ex now.
yeah, that's right. X-Men.
If
I
everybody's.
think
in agreement that-
each of us should take this and put their thoughts on paper relative to what X started with here. And then we then can take that and discuss it at our next meeting is what we want the specifics of our RFP to be. There's $26,000, I think, available.
Yes, sir.
And we should get moving on that, right?
Well, I'm gonna go over real quick these sections here, just to get through these. So we have demographics we talked about. Economy is the next one. Economic development, urban design, and community character. Now, these two go hand in hand. You don't, you know, and if you can't see why, then you probably shouldn't be on this board. You know, everything we design here in town, the way it looks, the way it feels, what makes it Manchester, that directly affect the businesses. And it's gonna affect what businesses come in or want to come. We still do have a surplus of empty retail spaces here in town. And so we need to think about a way to keep those filled. One of the things I was thinking about public art. I love going to Montreal. I mean, you guys ever go to Montreal? It's you can't go 50 feet in that town without seeing a mural or a sculpture or something that just you stop and you look at. And it's a beautiful city. If it didn't have all the art, it wouldn't be as beautiful, I think, but it has it. And Manchester has absolutely, except for right in front of the bookstore. And there's just not a lot of public art in this town. And it feels soulless because of that. It feels a little stale. There's smaller towns around us that have more art than we do. Granville has more public art than we do. You know, in front of the bookstore though, the little guy on the bench, the robot. If you look on Instagram, look up Manchester and type it in, you'll see people posing with that. You'll see people posing in front of the bookstore. Nothing's written in stone. That's not really a sculpture, but it kind of is. I see pictures of that thing all the time. So, you know, more public art is something that we could really look into to help the town grow. And it should, I feel like it should be written, I strongly feel that, because I have background, my degrees in art, should be written into the town plan in some way. A lot of cities do this. Town I used to live in did this, where they wrote it into, no public building can be built without a mural or a sculpture attached to it. And that was something that was written into it. So we just look at that as well, just to beautify the town. And there are a lot of artists around here who we could get, you know, grants for them to build and paint these things or whatever. So it would help come here and go, oh, that's a local Manchester artist and that's their piece. You know, it helps the town have more of a sense of place, a sense of identity. So that's economic development. So we touched on housing, public services and facilities. That's our water systems, police, fire services, parks, recreation, schools, libraries, and other essential facilities. Within that also is transportation. That's review infrastructure, roads, transit, walking, bike paths, airport. We don't have that, but we do have the airport, old airport out here. And anticipated traffic volumes, which we really need to look at if we're going to build more housing. Community health and wellness, focusing on factors impacting the health and well-being of residents. So that would be, hospitals, health centers, their hours, things like that. We do have another doctor's office here in town. He's part-time. We have the one downtown and we have the health center over here. So that's all we have for Manchester. But we really should have a way to put signage up for those. People can see them, know where they are if there's an emergency. A lot of hospitals have, towns have hospital signs, H's pointing to, something similar would be helpful in this town for someone who's in an emergency. Environmental conditions, natural resources, environment hazards, protection, conservation. When we do have this in our, in our water tables, our maps, our different districts are designed around that, but they're based on the town plan. So the town plan needs to touch on all that again. And we do get all of that from a lot of this information from our energy committee. And that could be a subsection of this or an appendix that we then put on the website that people can go to and view or download. That way we don't have to have it all printed out. That's how many pages is that? 48 pages?
Right.
Yeah, he was shaking and said, yeah, 48 pages. That's just that one part. So we can't really have that within the town plan and have someone still read the town.
I agree.
Yeah,
Strongly agree.
so yes, that's sustainability. Land use, mapping, existing development patterns, residential, commercial, industrial, public areas, along with density information. Now we do have this already, but we should revisit it and make sure it's all up to date and it follows the vision for what we see future growth for future land use, which is also the next thing here. And historic preservation, I have also within land use because we really need to look at our historic areas and make sure any building that's built before a certain date or period is included within that historic zone if it's on the edge of it.
I
So
thought the town plan does put enough focus on the historic preservation.
so we did a walkthrough a while back with Sean Harrington a few years ago and we walked around town and we actually added a few things to the Bonnet Street area. We expanded a few houses that were older houses to include them within the historic district. We never really walked the Depot Street area and added things, but the Depot Street area has a lot of older houses around it that aren't really included within that historic district, and I feel they should be. Because someone could just come in and tear down something that's 200 years old with a shingled roof and put in a new building, it will lose part of the charm of that neighborhood. So we should look at that. I'm not saying that you have to do that, but I'm saying we should look at it and discuss it in the future. So each section should have goals and objectives, context expressing the community's desire, future state, the future state of this community, set the goals and objectives for achieving it. So we basically put a plan in there to go forward with each of these, not just have it, this is what we want, but a way to achieve what we want. And so I found this online too. This is really cool. This section outline strategies. This section outlines specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound SMART, what they call it. That's an acronym. Steps for achieving the goals and objectives. It identifies responsible parties, resources, and timelines for implementation. Okay, I said it. That would give us a way to achieve each of these. And that's going to be the tougher part of each of these sections because we can write what we want, but we have to figure out how to achieve it.
Can we focus on that in relationship to this whole thing that you did, which is excellent, by the way? But in effect, that implementation and strategies should be at the beginning or at the end of all these.
Yeah,
This whole thing
right.
is in effect.
It's basically, these are in each of
These are all part of it. And
Yeah.
other comments I have is, it would be my suggestion, and I would hope we could agree, either agree or disagree, that each of us take this document, which I think is excellent, and put our own thoughts on paper and distribute it X. And And in our next meeting, then go over what our observations are onto your project. And
And, you know, I put my top priorities, these are my personal top priorities, respecting historical character of the town. Reflecting community identity, which is, you know, who we are as Manchester, who are the Mancunians, or who are we? Highlighting local features, like, you know, that would be like, Prospect Rock, or different things that we have, Benson's Hole with swim, and different things, the golf courses, the Burton, different things that are what, you know, are important to the town, make the town. Green spaces, more green spaces. If we can figure out a way to get more green spaces, that would be great. You know, I like seeing little parks, and each of those green spaces can have sculptures, can have different lights or different themes, different things that make it unique to the town. Cohesive streetscapes, so that we have matching benches and light posts and different things that in each, you know, zone that make it feel like it's all one. We did that with the open flags. We had a cohesive open flag. And I want to see that, you know, go through with everything that we look at in town plan. Public art, I touched on that already. Fostering a strong sense of place. Like, this is like, when you come here, you're like, oh, I'm in Manchester. I'm not in another part of Vermont. I'm in Manchester. This is what Manchester is, and it feels like Manchester. So when people come here, and people who live here, we are celebrating our town and what it is, you know. And smart growth that looks to the future, and that's housing, that's roads, that's parks, and whatever else that we do, schools, you know. So, and that's schools coming up pretty soon. That's not us, but that's going to be happening. So.
I think this is great. You just mentioned Burton. I think I personally would like to see some connection to Burton in regard to the planning of what Manchester is going to look like in 20, 25 years.
Give it as a class assignment and get input from students.
It's their town. So
It's their future.
I would warn you, X, that this is so good that you might have to become the person that leads our program of.
I just voted him in.
Yeah.
David's the guy.
I'd like to propose that each of us put our thoughts on paper regarding this work.
Yeah, and we can all add to it, just
Added-
starting point.
Thoughts on what?
Starting point.
Yeah.
Comments?
Can we get it? Not just Word, but pages too?
That was the question.
Can we get a soft copy of this?
Soft copy, you mean on your computer?
Computer?
I can email you the file. Yeah. Just a Word document.
I don't have anything else. Do others?
Can you read it?
Leon, would you mind distributing these to the select board as well?
It's just a starting point. It's just.
No, but they would want to see it, I think, just because we've talked a lot about getting this, like, the second iteration of the plan moving along, and I think this is such a great start to it.
Okay.
Yeah, because our old plan, and this is what Janet told me, is that our old plan was added upon and added upon and added upon and never written from scratch. And the idea was that the one that we just voted in would have been one we written from scratch, but we didn't have time. So now we're going to write it from scratch and start over. And I know a lot of the old timers are very upset about that because they worked on those old plans, but it doesn't mean that we can't start a new, you know, and we can use things from the old plan. Of course, you know.
Other issues? Yes.
Are you gonna start tightening up your zoning and ordinances that it doesn't have?
I will tell you my response to that. It's not possibly the response of the whole group, but I will say, I think the town plan is verbose. It's just too long. It's too wordy. It can be condensed and not lose any effectiveness. And that effectiveness should keep in mind where we're going to be in 20, 25 years and what we're going to look like all the time, trying to still be Manchester, not anything different. Separately from that, I think the ordinances need more work than the town plan. It's confusing. The person that walks into Peter's office wants to build has a little store in town or something. He needs hours of Peter's time to understand what he has to go through and how he has to apply and on and on. it shouldn't be that difficult. And when I go to the ordinances and try to find something, there was an issue that I was talking to Elias about today. And it took me a half an hour to figure out where it was in the ordinance that applied to this specific issue. And that's not right. The ordinance has to be streamlined and made easier to understand. So that's my personal opinion on it.
I think we restarted with the town plan. And then the town plan dictates the ordinances. And then we will reorganize the ordinances and rewrite based upon the new town plan.
Did we just approve a new town plan?
We
That's the administrative.
readopted the old town. Yeah.
We readopted the existing town plan without doing what we should need to do.
I just think we were taking up what we have to focus the DRB, so the DRB sort of stops running away. Really run away. That's my only
Other issues?
thing.
I have a motion from you.
Motion to adjourn?
Yes, would you, a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
I thought that was a good meeting.
Thank you.
Gentlemen.
Thank you.
All right. Did we pass?
Always a pleasure.
Recording stopped.
Great stuff.
And thanks for coming. I mean, you know,
Thank you.
I mean,